The UN Security Council's meeting held over the recent riots in Iran, under pressure from the United States, did not go as planned and instead turned into the scene of objections to Washington's policies by three veto-holding permanent members of the Council, namely Russia, China and France. PressTV has spoken to Scott Rickard, a political analyst, and Adam Gary, the managing editor of exaggerating.com, about Washington's stance on the latest events in Iran. Scott Rickard maintains that the US is exaggerating about the developments in Iran to benefit its own agenda, adding that the protests in Iran are not even comparable in terms of scale and numbers to those held in the US in recent years, including the Occupy Wall Street protests. If you look back into the late 60s, they did the same thing when the USS Liberty was attacked by Israel and then subsequently, USS Pueblo was attacked by North Korea. Obviously, the USS Liberty was covered up and Pueblo was made international news, Rickard said. At the same time, he continued, when you are looking at protests in other countries in which the US has an agenda to basically overthrow the government, it is very common for them to exaggerate statistics and to exaggerate the means in which the protests are being conducted. The image grab shows Scott Rickard, a political analyst, and Adam Gary, the managing editor of exaggerating.com, on PressTV's The Debate on January 6, 2018. Meanwhile, Adam Gary, the other panelist on the show, opined that the protests in Iran were actually conducted based on a plot by Israeli officials and senior members of Donald Trump's administration in revenge for the defeats Iran has imposed on the Israeli-backed terrorist groups in Syria and Iraq. It is no coincidence that the protests happened right after Zionist media, most notably the Jerusalem Post, published an article outlining some of the vague points of a new dossier on Iran that Washington and Tel Aviv have agreed on, Gary said. The subject of the dossier was how to constrain, contain, and confront the Islamic Republic of Iran, a country that has done nothing to deserve a single piece of violence being thrown on its way, but because Iran played a substantial part in defeating proxy terrorist groups aligned with the Zionist regime and the Washington regime, they must pay, in the mind of the lunatics who run those regimes, he added.